of the
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon for those where it's afternoon, and good morning or day for those where we don't need to talk about time zones. Let's just move on to getting us started. Welcome and thanks to all of you for registering and showing up for this Ontario Systems webinar produced by insideARM.com, Building a World-Class Compliance Management System on a Shoestring Budget. Ontario Systems is joined today by experts from Todd, Bremer & Lawson, Inc. and Team Recovery. So let's get through some introductions. Rozanne Andersen serves as Ontario Systems Vice President of Business Development and Chief Compliance Officer. She is responsible for leading Ontario Systems corporate efforts in response to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau's launch of compliance examinations in the ARM industry. Chip Hellman is a member of Ontario Systems Business Development Team as the founder and CEO of MedSource, Inc., a healthcare outsourcing and collections company with offices throughout the United States. Chip's vast experience includes active accounts receivable management, late-stage collections, information technology, client and consumer relations, mergers and acquisitions, and accounting and finance operations. Now a consultant focused on helping companies navigate the industry's complex regulatory challenges surrounding the CFPB's requirements, Chip specializes in management consulting, management training programs, agency performance audits, litigation support, and CFPB gap assessments, where he brings operational insight to compliance objectives. Beth Zamorsky is controller at Todd, Bremer & Lawson, Inc. Beth oversees all areas of accounting, including consumer payment processing, client statement preparation, accounts payable, accounts receivable, payroll, taxation, and external audit. She also handles all personnel and benefits administration, as well as general office administration. Beth serves as a member of the Board of Directors and Corporate Treasurer in addition to responsibilities as Controller. Leslie Engel is the Chief Operating Officer for Team Recovery. She has been in the industry of third-party collections since 1982, becoming sole owner of her own agency with her husband in 1999. She has served on and chaired many committees in both her State Collectors Association as well as ACA International. And finally, hi. I'm Mike Bevel, an editor here at insideARM. A few pieces of housekeeping. Please note the questions box available to you. All of your mics have been muted. However, you can send your questions via that chat box at any time during this presentation. Some will answer during the presentation, some we'll save for the Q&A at the end, some we won't be able to get to, but we will do our best. You will receive follow-up materials like, for instance, today's PowerPoint presentation from Ontario Systems within a week or so of this webinar. Please make sure to take a few minutes to complete the very short survey after this webinar ends. The information is incredibly valuable to us at insideARM as webinar producers, and it's valuable for Ontario Systems as well. We value your thoughts and opinions very much. In this survey, there's a space for additional questions, so if you did ask a question that we weren't able to get to, or if you thought of something as you logged out, you can type it in there. The final bit of housekeeping, I've got some legalese that I need to read through on the record. Let me bring it up on the screen because I'm going to go pretty fast. So please bear with me. Here we go. This information shared in this webinar is not intended to be legal advice, but simply informed opinion from a panel. It may not be used as legal advice. Legal advice must be tailored to the legal circumstances of the case. Every effort is made to ensure this information is up to date. It is not intended to be a full and exhaustive explanation of the law in any area, however, nor should it be used to replace the advice of your own legal counsel. And with that out of the way, we can dive right into what you all signed up for. So the overview is, here's what we're going to cover. A word from the CFPB, key components of a CMS, the cost of compliance, the cost of non-compliance, the role of the third party, and then there will be a panelist discussion of their compliance experiences, and then Q&A if we have the time for it. So to give us toward the end of this, I'm going to hand the reins over to Ontario Systems' very own Rozanne Andersen to get us started. Rozanne?
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate that. And welcome, everyone, to this afternoon's webinar. First, I wanted to just comment a bit about the title of today's webinar, Building a World-Class Compliance Management System on a Shoestring Budget. One of the most common laments we hear when we're out in the field from people in the industry, it really comes down to their concern that all these new compliance requirements may be driving many out of business. I mean, they're very, very concerned about the cost of compliance and their ability to comply at a level that is has really a level that no one has really seen before. So as we prepared for this webinar, we thought it was important to convey that the compliance requirements really can be satisfied and the CFPB's expectations can be met without spending exorbitant amounts of money. In my personal opinion, it's more about the process and the culture of your organization than it is about anything else that we're going to share this afternoon. But that was the reason that we referenced the Shoestring Budget. It was really to really grab people's attention and to also drive home the point that you are able to tailor your compliance management system to the size and complexity of your organization, as well as the particular market segment you serve. So with that backdrop, we're going to focus on this slide that I hope all of you can see. It's a slide that I prepared, and in fact the next few slides are really quotes that I've gleaned from the CFPB Supervision and Examination Manual, because I thought it would provide people with some degree of comfort that the CFPB clearly not only expects but supports efforts to build a compliance management system. This particular quote states, weaknesses in compliance management systems can result in violations of law or regulation and associated harm to consumers. Therefore, the CFPB expects every regulated entity under its supervision and enforcement authority to have an effective compliance management system adapted to its business strategy and operation. And we added the emphasis because many people ask me, well, are you sure we really have to have a compliance management system? We're not a larger market participant. And I always respond with, yes, it does apply to everyone. This quote pretty much sums it up. Every regulated entity under its supervision, you may not all be under its supervision, but you are under its enforcement authority. If you are a collection agency, an asset buyer, or a collection law firm. So I think that sums up the rationale or the reason everyone has this heightened focus on building a compliance management system. Mike, let's go to the next slide. Some others have told me, well, you know, I'm not really sure if the CFPB is going to, well, some even question whether it's going to stay in place at all. Some wonder if maybe power and authority may be reined in a bit. But in my opinion, the CFPB is not going anywhere, and its mandate is clear. It states in that supervision manual, any collection agency, debt buyer, or collection law firm under the CFPB's purview is expected to comply with consumer financial laws and address and prevent violations of law and associated harms to consumers through its compliance management process. So the reference to consumer financial laws, I think, is particularly important. Another key point that we want to drive home in this webinar is that compliance with the FDCPA, the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, is not the sole purpose of the compliance management system. The CFPB has identified 18 federal consumer financial laws that satisfy this definition that apply to the credit and collection industry. In my opinion, only 6 apply specifically to the collection side of the industry, and those 6 would include the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, the Fair Credit Reporting Act, the Electronic Funds Transfer Act, two new area laws that, well, actually they're not new laws. They are only new to our industry to some extent, but the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, the Unfair, Deceptive, or Abusive Acts and Practices section of Dodd-Frank, and the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act. So those 6 are the cornerstones, if you will, of your compliance management system. And as a practical matter, you must also include compliance with the TCPA. So this means that the system or the process you have in place at your company must address compliance with each of these laws, not just the FTCPA, and address specifically the steps you are going to take to prevent violations of the law, not just react to them, and any associated harm to consumers. So let's go to slide 8, the next slide. Fortunately, or unfortunately, depending upon your bias, you need not go it alone. In fact, the CFPB has actually identified the use of third parties as a viable option when it comes to compliance management. And here's the last quote of the day. The CFPB understands that compliance will likely be managed differently by large banking organizations with complex compliance profiles and a wide variety of range of consumer financial products at one end of the spectrum than by those entities that may be owned by a single individual and feature a narrow range of financial products and services at the other end of the spectrum. Compliance may be managed on a firm or enterprise-wide basis, and supervised entities may engage outside firms to assist with compliance management. So the mandate is clear that you need a compliance management system, but if it is a silver lining, you need not go it alone. Let's go to the next slide. So just to review, the key components of a compliance management system, which again is a process, it's not a thing, and as defined by the CFPB, it involves oversight, in particular by your board or governing body, the president, the owner, you name it, but the top governing body of your organization. It requires a compliance program, which is different than a compliance management system. It involves a consumer complaint response system and internal or external audits. So those are the 4 main components. Next slide. The first item I mentioned was oversight by the governing body. So it requires that your board or your management team actually oversees and drives compliance from the top down. This means that they actually have board meetings and minutes to reflect this expectation on the part of the organization. In many organizations of any size, I'd say 50 or more employees, you should consider a compliance committee, people in your organization that will help really monitor your level of compliance, your call auditing performance, your collector's performance, and note any required changes to your policies and procedures or your processes, for example. You may want to have a full-time compliance officer on staff, or a compliance manager, a compliance director, but somebody who actually wears the hat of worrying about compliance, who works independently from your operations department. Oversight will eventually impact your entire staff. You cannot say that compliance is the responsibility of one person. It's functionally, to some extent, the responsibility of everyone. And another key part of oversight, any good compliance management system will drive continual change, continuous improvement within your organization. Next slide. The next element of that CMS I mentioned is your compliance program. Quick review, they're fairly self-explanatory, but if you need a checklist to help review what is in a compliance program, it would be your policies and procedures. By the way, from a compliance standpoint, policies and procedures are those that pertain to compliance with those consumer financial laws, not operations, not your software application, not your no-day policy or your employee manual. These are your policies and procedures that apply, that help you prevent violations of the law and any associated consumer harm. It also includes a document repository, whether it's electronic in a large organization or an Excel spreadsheet in a small. I guess it really doesn't matter, but some way to track and all of your documents within your organization that pertain to compliance. Your compliance program also includes the process you use to stay current on changes in consumer financial laws and regs. You cannot overlook your compensation plan. No longer is a compensation program compensation program that is that only rewards those who drive revenue acceptable. The CFPB has introduced a new element, and it's fine to drive revenue, obviously, but the critical piece of the new today's compensation plan is to also drive compliance with the law. So revenue plus a high level of complaints is not considered an acceptable approach. You also will include a vendor and service oversight function. You cannot farm out your responsibility, so to speak. You need to have a very thoughtful process to oversee your service providers. And this includes extending all of your compliance program components to your branches and business units. Training and testing is a huge part of compliance because that's how you talk the talk and walk the walk and ensure that your team is actually performing in accordance with your compliance expectations. And as I mentioned earlier, monitoring your progress and taking corrective action is critical. Next slide, Mike.
Rozanne, do you mind, there are a question came in that I think would be best to be asked right now.
Okay.
And it has to do with, should a third-party agency have two procedure policy books, one for CMS and one for the rest?
I mean, in a sense, yes. I mean, I guess to the extent, I mean, whether they're two or whether they're part one and part two, I know that's not what you're really asking, but in effect, you are going to end up with two sets of policies. Sometimes they may relate to one another, but for the most part, what we've seen is that, that they're entirely different animals.
Gotcha. Here's our next slide.
The third component of your CMS includes the Customer Complaint Response Program. I'm sure by now you've all registered through the CFPB's complaint portal. That would be step one. And then the process you establish to respond to both verbal and written consumer complaints, regardless of their source, whether it comes from an attorney, the Attorney General Office, the CFPB, or the consumer directly, you still need to have a process in place. And verbal complaints may be something that you, in your mind, you think, well, we just de-escalate those concerns at the collector level. And that's possible. We're not going to get into the validity of that position. But the heightened focus on tracking and being able to respond to trends within your organization would include the duty to track verbal complaints and concerns as well. You'll need a timely response to all complaints, aggregate them so you can watch the trends and identify any deficiencies within your organization, and of course adjust your business practices as required. Next slide. And this last slide is just a reminder of that compliance audit requirement. I just want to remind people, though I am biased, I want to be clear, you can handle your annual assessment internally, or you can hire a third party to perform an external audit, if you will. Regardless of the position you eventually take in this regard, somebody has to be assessing your compliance management system in terms of its effectiveness. Obviously, a third party presents more independence and less bias, but the attention to that detail is critical. Call auditing and scorecards are also important to include in your annual audit. Knowing what is being said and not said on telephone calls with consumers is critical, and bringing those audit results to the highest governing body is also critical. Conducting an assessment but not sharing the news and the results and not reacting to those results really is a less than sufficient way to approach a compliance audit. And finally, with regard to audits, many people say, well, I hate to document any failures, if you will. Won't that just be fodder for others? And all I can say is there are some very reasonable approaches to address those concerns that you can certainly address with your own legal counsel or either Chip or myself offline. So with that, I will turn this over to Chip, unless there are any questions that, Mike, you think we need to address now.
Not now. At the end, I have one that I'm saving for the end. So you're safe to sit back for a moment.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Rozanne. That's excellent. And we want to talk a bit about the cost of compliance. And this is a bit of a difficult item to get our arms around as operators, because through the years we've seen and watched for things that could really aid us in running our business. For example, the ACA Cost of Operations Survey for years was a way to benchmark or compare your operations, if you will, to what was going on in the industry. But noticeably missing from those types of reports are line items that say compliance. We've never really tracked it before. And by way of this webinar, I think we're suggesting indeed that we should be tracking the money we're spending for compliance. And ultimately, the industry, it would be helpful to come up with some benchmarking tools to help us know how much we should be spending on compliance. But what we've listed on this slide are some areas in which, to be compliant, we are indeed spending money. And so some are obvious, some not so obvious. So as we look at personnel, clearly, obviously, if we had a compliance officer or manager, that would go into this line item. However, there are other more subtle expenses built into our own P&Ls because, for example, how are we handling indirect FCRA disputes? Whether it be, for example, e-Oscar disputes. That's typically managed or handled by our operations people, and they're already in the budget. We have our direct consumer disputes that come maybe by phone to our collection staff or customer service staff, definitely through the mail. But these are areas where we're spending money on personnel that could indeed be driving our costs up, things like call auditing. And as we audit, not just for collection performance, but for compliance, again, it's very important that we keep good records and remediate and move quickly when we see that our staff's not conducting calls in a compliant way. And of course, employee training and testing, all under the category of personnel as a cost of compliance. Our software and technology, new things that have become important in recent years. For example, cell phone scrubbing, the manual calling of cell phones for which we do not have express consent from the consumer may require new dialing technology or telephony type technology. We have our IVRs, our payment portals, our web portals. Again, these are technologies that support compliance. We have training and testing, and as Rozanne said earlier in this webinar, it's no longer just about training collectors how to make a good phone call, but to help them make good compliant phone calls sensitive to the FDCPA, the FCRA, when we process payments, making sure our staff knows the ETFA, the electronic EFTA, the Electronic Funds Transfer Act, and of course UDAP, the Equal Credit Opportunity Act. So all of these things that we need to be training our staff on now roll up into our cost structure. And of course role-based training, very important. We have our data services and then our internal assessments and external assessments or external audits. And we're all spending money on certifications, whether it's ACA's certification programs for Chief Compliance Officer or the Compliance Professional designation, for sending our staff to seminars or trade group meetings or participating in calls like this webinar, all would drive our costs up. So if you include everything, what would you be spending on compliance in your operation? And a better question even, what should you be spending? And we're all trying to get our arms around that. Mike, if you'll move and advance the slide. But the opposite of that, or in addition to that, what is the cost of non-compliance? What if we don't do these things? Can you put your arms around or quantify the cost of non-compliance? I would suggest to you today that one of the main areas that we're going to see in coming months and years, it may not be, depending on the size of your organization, it may not be that the CFPB is going to come into your shop necessarily and hit you with some fine. What I think you might feel first is some potential loss of clients, because as the large creditors understand their responsibilities to manage their service providers, they're narrowing that scope for themselves by reducing the number of collection vendors they use. Debt buyers are doing the same thing as they look for services of the paper they buy. So we need to be sensitive to the fact that a real cost of non-compliance is not being competitive in the marketplace and potentially losing customers because of that. We also have the consumer lawsuits, which we all are aware of. We have regulatory actions. The state attorneys general, it's an important, and in my own notes I put a star by that, because it seems to me we're hearing more and more that when the CFPB does come in, they're bringing in some state attorneys general with them, or the reverse is often true. Maybe a complaint or an action starts with a state attorney general, and maybe they contact the CFPB. One thing's for sure, those entities are speaking to one another, and they're not just coming in by themselves anymore. Sometimes they come in together. So it's important that we understand that if we are under the scrutiny of the attorneys general and there is some action on their part, all these things that as we defend ourselves or answer complaints, it drives our costs up. Of course, the obvious CFPB actions, maybe not so obvious, rising insurance costs and deductibles. So what would our objectives be? You can advance, Mike, please, to the next slide. I'd like for us to discuss some possible compliance objectives. And I would like to just ask you or encourage you maybe to change your way of thinking on this. Up until just recently, the majority of the mindset, if you will, the strategy regarding compliance has been a defensive measure. If you think about it as a sporting event, most compliance initiatives within companies are intended to play defense. And that defense is to reduce compliance risk. And it's admirable. You want to reduce your risk. But I would suggest to you that there's also an offensive play here, and that's to gain market share. More and more as we are out working with companies on their compliance programs, we're hearing that they've gotten calls. Some of these companies have been in business for years, and they now have strong compliance programs, and they're getting calls from creditors, or creditors are talking to them for the first time in their business history because they're now more concerned not so much with recovery, but choosing service providers or collection companies that have strong compliance programs. Because even for the creditor, the consumer lawsuit is a cost of non-compliance. So the focus is shifting. And maybe as an industry, we need to shift our focus and consider compliance to be a marketing edge that we have in the marketplace if we turn compliance into a marketing advantage instead of just playing defense. But a defensive measure is reducing risk. Another defensive measure is managing our compliance costs. So overall, a simple strategy, simply stated, would be to have the best compliance program at the lowest possible cost. So how would you do that? Mike, if you'll advance to the next slide. It's not always wise to build it yourself. If your goal was to have the best phone system in the industry or the best collection software in the industry, you wouldn't necessarily build it yourself. You would look around to see what type of third-party experts are out there to help you write the code, as an example, or build the phone technology. And what we're seeing now more and more in the marketplace is that companies are reaching to third parties to get help. And so when would they, or what would they do to help us in this endeavor? Well, first off, if a third party can provide additional experience and expertise, then that is what we need. It speaks to the quality of our compliance program. Perhaps the third party just simply has increased bandwidth. They can provide more resources so that we move the compliance program forward quicker, faster, obviously, and maintain the quality we expect. Another key consideration when bringing in a third party is, what is your management doing right now? Are they losing focus on the core business because they're so mired up in compliance-related issues? If so, the third party may be able to allow management to refocus on profitability and growth. And then, as with any consultant, if you're able to bring in a third party, they may be able to help reduce your overall spend. I think your compliance spend, what you're spending on compliance. I think a great sort of simple example of this is if you hired your general counsel and said, I need you to write compliance policies for me, and they sat down at whatever they charge you per hour and started, literally with blank sheets of paper and started drafting compliance policies, there's no telling how much that would cost you in the end. But maybe there's some opportunities out there to find that high-quality compliance or model policy template. And so it may be that a third party, there may be a way to save money by bringing in some experts. So finally, before we move to our questions, the last slide, Mike, for me, you could advance. You should consider hiring a third party if you do not have the skill set or the bandwidth to build your CMS to your satisfaction by yourself, if compliance is taking too much time from your key managers, or if you can simultaneously improve the quality of your CMS and reduce your overall compliance costs. Those would be good, valuable reasons on why to bring a third party in to assist you in building your CMS. So with that said, I think we want to turn to our panelists. And Mike, I'm going to flip back over to you and let you lead us through that part of the program.
Sure. And as a reminder, these questions are going to be, I'm going to direct them first to our two other panelists, Beth Zamorsky, who is with Todd Bremer and Lawson, and Leslie Engel for Team Recovery. Beth, I'm going to ask you to answer first, but I'm also interested in Leslie jumping in with her perspective as well. So the first question I'm going to throw out to you is, why has your organization made a commitment to compliance? What prompted that change? If there was a change, what prompted that for you?
Okay, well, first and foremost, we want to do the right thing. We've been really lucky in that we haven't had many lawsuits, at least not as many as probably some other agencies, knock on wood, but we have still seen a sharp increase in the number of lawsuits. We've been sued more in the last 3 years than we had been in the previous 30 years probably. So even though we're always striving to do the right thing, it's hard for us to find the time to implement the program. So new laws and regulations are always being passed and interpreted in the courts, both nationally and then also at the state and now municipal level even. And we want to comply. It's just getting harder to do that than ever before because not only are the laws becoming more complex and numerous, but we've grown as an agency too. We're still very small, but we have grown. We've added collectors and we've added administrative staff. It's almost impossible for the individual collectors to feel like they're doing all the right things all the time without constant reminders. And our admin staff, of course, needs help with the company-wide issues like dispute resolution and vendor management, things like that. And one person just can't do it alone. It takes everyone to have that compliance-focused attitude. And we really need a system to keep that on track. So we've been trying to implement something, but it has been difficult. And if that weren't enough, our clients are asking for it. Like Chip mentioned a few minutes ago, there's almost always a question on RFPs that we get now that relates to our compliance management system. Our clients are very concerned with this area of our business.
So Leslie, do you want to take a stab at that question as well, please?
Yes, thank you. A lot of what Beth said just rings true here, and I know for many of you that are on this webinar, we're not on this webinar but because we're not committed to compliance. We are, and we have been. Compliance is even more important now because of the addition with the contradictions with lawsuits and the interpretations depending on the jurisdiction that's overseeing a case. So it's very, very important that we stay committed. But as Beth said, it's become harder even in that endeavor. And as we focus on this, it's like you're learning the rules like of a game, only this is not a game, but you're learning rules to something, and you continue on with education, and you're trying to keep updated, and you have to keep updated. And I guess the first thing I want to add to all of that for all of you listening is we can't get overwhelmed by it, and we can't be alarmed by it. It's just revved up a notch, and with everybody taking it seriously and getting the consultation, whether it be you hire somebody or you hire an outside piece to it, there are ways to get help. And I guess that's my biggest thing. I want everybody, if you guys could all just like take a deep breath out there and, okay, there's a way to put this in place. And our hope is maybe through this webinar and then later in Rozanne and Chip, by continuing to talk with one another, we can conquer this, but we do have to stay committed to it.
I don't think I could improve on either one of those answers. So I'm going to, unless Chip and Rozanne want to jump in, I'm going to move us on to the second one. I take silence as acquiescence.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So Beth, I'm going to come back to you again. As you build your CMS, what are the top 3 pain points you are experiencing as you try to implement this sort of newish policy idea?
Okay. Well, finding someone to run it really has been the hardest part for us. We're a small company, like I said, so adding even one administrative staff person is a huge deal for us. But as it is, we're all stretched too thin doing our other jobs and then trying to put out fires that come up relating to compliance issues. And like Chip said before, too, that the focus is brought away from those managers' day-to-day jobs to do these other compliance things, and that's not their area of expertise anyway, so it's just not a very efficient system. We've just had to deal with the issues as they've come, and most of the time the department head that sort of is affected the most by that particular issue is the one who sort of takes the lead. But what happens is the communication isn't always there, and we're finding things aren't always communicated appropriately to everyone else in the company, and so that's really been our biggest problem. We need that one central point person, and then also finding the time to do the research that it takes to stay on top of everything has been extremely difficult. We feel like we subscribe to all the resources, and the ACA puts out resources, and but none of us really have the expertise to make sure that we're getting the most reliable information the quickest. So we're just kind of getting everything piecemeal. And again, the different department heads hear about, they might read something, somebody sends them an email, they're on a chat board or something, that they hear about a new state law or a new court case, and they maybe don't always see the effect that it might have on the other departments, so they don't always communicate it and say, hey, I heard about this, it might affect you too. And then the last thing is really training. We find that collectors as a whole, not every one of them, but as a whole, don't like change very much. So in their defense, though, they have so many things that they have to remember to do or not to do based on who they're calling, where they're calling, what kind of debt they're calling on. Every time we throw something new at them, I can just kind of see their faces trying to process that information and figure out how are they going to fit that part of what we just told them into their already complicated personal collection process that they use. They have to be able to make those snap decisions and recall all these rules, and while they're on the phone, or they're just going to lose their consumer. So it's hard for us to keep them on top of things, and so those are really our three biggest problems.
I'm going to ask Leslie, but I also want to suggest if you're in the audience and these questions are, if you have any insight that you want to share, if you want to share maybe what your own agency's pain points might be around CMS implementation, I would love to see those if you want to send those through. Leslie, how would you answer that question?
A lot of the top three pains for us, they rotate depending on the day, honestly. What I might say today, my number 2 might become number 1 tomorrow. So for me, they're all three major pain points. First of all, the contradictions in the interpretations of the rules and the laws and the guidelines, those continue to be top frustrations, because when you have a clear guideline, it's very easy to comply. You can learn it, you can do it. When you can get sued either way, then there's less, as Beth was saying, it lessens motivation for your people to care about the legal process because the legal process isn't clear. So it's still something we have to forge on and be part of that keeps our industry clean, but it's a frustration. The other thing is the time involved in implementing and keeping up with the compliance. Motivations become harder. It's a harder component, as Beth was saying, for people to comply. And honestly, there's so much now that when you have experienced collectors that are doing it right and they're becoming fearful because of doing it wrong, because there's so many things, it makes it very difficult. And this is a large reason why I believe, at least for us, because we're smaller also, but hiring an outside compliance piece has helped us because, number one, it's given us fresh eyes. We're all busy trying to do what we're supposed to be the best at. Our specialty is third-party collections. So to add this element, which we cannot ignore and we want to take seriously because we do want to do it right, we have to get that help. And finding a good source is also a bit of a pain point because it used to be you could just get a clearer, quicker, direct answer to a question on a law or an interpretation or how to do something, and now there's so many different elements. But again, if we stay focused at it, we can at least eliminate some of the pain in those pain points.
Sure. I'll just share quickly that somebody from the audience mentioned that the challenge really is getting collectors to understand that your compliance department isn't the bad guy, even though it may seem that way because of what you're sharing. That really, we're here to protect you and the business, and sure.
And that's a good point, whoever made that, because if your employees know that your agency is behind them and behind getting them the right information, it does take a layer of worry off of them because that trust is built in you, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. I think that's a really great point. Leslie, I'm going to keep you on deck, actually, and ask you this question first. Have you considered hiring additional staff to build your CMS?
That's a loaded question for me. Yes, we have. And to go back to some of the pieces that Chip covered, you run the numbers because you're hiring somebody in and everything that goes with that. And I think it's only a matter of time that everyone will have additional staff to help keep up with this piece. However, starting with the additional resource of a reliable industry, and outsourcing has been a huge help for us, and it's also made it doable. It's not such an overwhelming cost point, I guess is the best way to say, and we're doing a good job at it. So the answer is yes, but I'm doing both.
Beth?
Well, yes, we actually did hire someone to build our compliance management system a few years ago. We hired somebody right out of law school. We just decided that we needed someone who could help us with the day-to-day compliance issues, and as well as making some of the procedural changes that we knew we needed to make. We needed good policies and procedures and a training program that really would be reliable for us. And so we hired somebody and sent her to a lot of training, and she was on a webinar or at a conference. It seemed like every day, all the time, she was doing things, learning the collection industry, basically, because finding someone who has a background in collections in our little small town was not an easy thing to do. So we found somebody, brought her in, trained her. She really did a lot of good things for us, no question, but after a year and a half, she took that knowledge and went to work for a law firm doing the same thing that she did for us. So she took all of that knowledge and experience that we gave her with her, which is fine, but we invested a lot in that. Well, like I said, she did a lot of good while she was here, but we invested a lot in her training, and she took that with her when she left, and so it kind of put us not quite back where we started, but we definitely have an empty hole now that we are trying to figure out what to do with. So.
Sure. Leslie, I'm going to go back to you for a second. What obstacles have you faced with finding and retaining a compliance officer, director, or manager? Do you have any similar retention stories like Beth just shared, where you train someone and then they leave you for someone better? Or
well, fortunately, we have not had that yet, but I can see that being the case just as it is with any other position, honestly. And the piece that we kind of did differently when we looked at this, when we were laying this out and making the decision of, okay, do we bring somebody on for this, or do we do an outside third party to start, was because the way, number one, the ambiguity in all of the decisions that this person would have to make, because there's no clear place to go. If you could go to a webinar and have today's answer and it would be live tomorrow, that would be more helpful, but it's not quite like that. The other thing is decisions now, CFPB, as Rozanne mentioned earlier, those decisions are having to be involved by upper management or owners, et cetera, because a lot of things are becoming just business decisions on which way you want to go versus a clear cut. So all of that to say it's very hard, and when you think about it, you really almost have to start with somebody, as Beth sort of said, that already knows our industry, or you're training them on the whole industry.
Sure. Beth, do you want to add? You answered this a little bit in the last one. Do you want to add any more to? Are there any additional obstacles that you faced?
Well, no. I mean, I think I did kind of cover that with the last answer, and then as I'll kind of just reiterate what Leslie said too. It is difficult to find someone who has either the experience or the knowledge, expertise in the collections industry, and bring them in. Probably, at least where we are, we would have to bring somebody in from somewhere else, and probably they're out of our price range, to be perfectly honest. We probably can't afford them. So, and that's really been a huge obstacle for us. We just don't know where to find that person that we can afford to do what we need them to do.
Yeah, those are the two key things, right? To find the person A, but can you afford the person B?
Right.
That's the tightrope walk. And I think what's interesting to me a little bit is the usually when you're looking for a collector, you want to find someone, my understanding is collection agencies would rather have someone fresh because you're not having to sort of retrain over bad habits, but then in a compliance person, you really want someone seasoned because there's too much out there.
Yes, you need to find someone who at least has the expertise to know where to go to look for all these new things that come out every day.
Right. You don't want someone doing on-the-job training with your compliance department. So I'm going to keep you online, Beth. Have you considered retaining a third party to support your compliance? And then, if yes, for what functions? But
okay. Yes, we have considered, and in fact, we just recently made the commitment to hire a third party to support our compliance program. We haven't actually kind of gotten it up and running yet, but we have decided that that's the route that we're going to go. They're going to handle writing and updating our policies and our procedures, and they're going to keep us informed on new things that we need to know about, set up the vendor management system and complaint tracking, help us set up a more formal collector monitoring process, do kind of a train the trainer type thing where we have someone internal who will actually manage the process, and they will just help that person know what direction to take and what to do when. We really kind of feel like this is going to suit us better because, like I said before, finding someone with the knowledge and expertise for what we wanted to pay them or what we could pay them was proving very difficult. So this is going to be, we think this is going to be the best solution for us, especially when we looked at who we were going to get to manage that program internally inside the company. We knew we still needed somebody sort of on the ground here to do the things that are recommended by the third party. And so what we did was we decided to move someone, an administrative person from elsewhere in the company into that position because she's been here for 10 years. She knows not only the industry, but she knows our company inside and out. And but she's not an attorney, and we don't have to pay her like one. So she's not actually having to come up with most of the procedures of how this compliance management system is going to work. She just has to implement them, and so that takes a lot of the hard part out of it. And then we just hired another admin person to fill her position. So it's really going to be a lot more cost effective for us.
Leslie?
Yes, we made the decision to retain outside third-party consultation for a couple of reasons. A little bit I touched on before, and I really think no matter what our size is or how we're growing, size of what we're doing. And that outside consultation has already given us a greater scope. They've helped us believe that it's doable. We've been able to focus down on the things that are important instead of wasting time on things that are not important, if that makes sense. It sort of has put everything into priority on which things to attack first. And, you know, it's helped us make the necessary proactive plan instead of going kicking and screaming into the new complexities. If we can go in peacefully with a plan, everything has and will go together a little more smoothly.
Sure. Beth, why
Yes.
do you think it is so? Why do you think it is so difficult for agencies to commit to compliance, both in terms of operations as well as in terms of building a robust compliance management system?
Well, I think it does come down to cost more than anything. I think it's trying to find the right solution for an agency based on its size and its type of collections and how many different areas they're having to cope with. So I really think that's the major factor. But the other thing that at least we've experienced in our company is that you know, our CEO has been doing this for 40+ years, and deep in his heart, he's a collector. And so when he first started in this business, the FDCPA didn't exist. Neither did a lot of these other collection laws. And so he remembers a time when it was almost a free-for-all. And so it is hard, I think, as a whole for the senior level management to, even if they've made that commitment, it's still hard for them to get past that time when they remember things were just easier back then whenever when was, and now things are much more difficult. There are so many more rules and things that we have to do and things that we have to follow, and so those kind of things make tough calls. We have to make a lot of tough decisions when we are making the decision to which direction to take our business, and I think that's hard.
Leslie, do you have anything you want to add to this?
I tend to be a very black or white type of person as far as perspective, meaning right is right and wrong is wrong, and it is just very difficult now for agencies to even train what is right and what is wrong. Like Beth said, you know, back then for me in the early 80s, there was one way to leave a right message for a consumer, and all the rest were wrong. And now I'm not sure if there's a right way, and you can get sued for either way you leave the message, and it makes it very difficult to want to do your job right. It makes it very difficult for those who care and are trying to take care of both the consumer and their client and respectfully in the industry. And it has become very difficult. And the concern for me is that if we don't build this robust compliance, I don't think anybody in our industry, I don't think will survive, because compliance is so key. At the same time, though, how do you build that compliance system with the costs involved when the clarity isn't out there? And I guess that's the biggest question for all of us, and we're all in it together.
That's a fantastic point. So I think I'm going to get Rozanne to jump back in here for this, where you can go to get help.
Or Chip.
Or Chip, either one.
Well, I'll be glad.
Chip, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure, I'll take this. Clearly, there are compliance professionals out there that can help with this process, and people like insideARM are a great place to go to find resources. Certainly, webinars such as this are very, very helpful, but also our trade associations such as ACA, and there's so many opportunities through ACA, for example. I mentioned earlier the compliance officer certification or the compliance professional certification. Those are great things companies can do to get help. MAP attorneys are out there, certainly consultants are out there, and companies who've developed robust compliance products and services are emerging out in the marketplace. So there are places to go, and we'll be glad to help align anybody on this webinar with the right resources based on what they need. They're welcome to contact us, at any time, either Rozanne or myself, and we'll point them in the right direction. But there are resources out there to get help. And some of the things they're helping with are things like the policies and procedures. Beth made just a really good list. Vendor and service provider oversight programs, internal assessment programs where people can assess their self, or external assessments, training and testing modules. There are all sorts of things, complaint tracking, complaint resolution, complaint data aggregation. These are all companies are out there now with solutions for a lot of this, and so that's been a breath of fresh air to the industry. It's just a matter of finding the right resource for the specific need you have.
Absolutely.
Mike, can I just add one point to the
yes.
before we go into the question and answer? I've been an attorney throughout my professional career and all my life, basically. Anyway, and one thing that's always difficult, and it proves to be true for the compliance officer, I can't tell you how they feel alone within an organization. So for anyone out there who employs a compliance officer or a compliance manager, realize that rarely do they have peers. I mean, if you're large enough, maybe that you have 3 or 4 attorneys, maybe you have a team of 8 compliance people, who knows, the numbers vary. But in most organizations, the person is an island. So I just really want to encourage people to consider the insideARM Compliance Professionals Forum. It's pretty cool, and it dovetails nicely with ACA's certification program. You can get your certification, but okay, now what do? How do you find peers to wrestle, the issues, find out what others are doing? Because as Leslie said, it's not all black and white, and I really think that is a great service to the industry that insideARM has presented.
All right. I have some, thank you very much for the compliments, but I have some questions from the audience that I would like to see if we can get through as many of these as we can. So are the 4 of you ready?
Yes.
Ready.
All right. Rozanne, this first one is for you. At the beginning of the webinar, you listed 6 pertinent laws. Can you repeat those?
Yes. The Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, so FDCPA, the Fair Credit Reporting Act, FCRA, the Graham-Leach-Bliley Act, GLBA. If you're not a debt buyer, the safeguards rule of the GLBA still applies to you. A little note to self there. The Electronic Funds Transfer Act, EFTA, so if you process any sort of payment electronically, you have to be in compliance with the EFTA. ECOA, Equal Credit Opportunity Act, and UDAP, Unfair, Deceptive, or Abusive Acts and Practices. And then I added as the 7th, just as a practical matter, even though the CFPB does not have jurisdiction per se over the TCPA, the Telephone Consumer Protection Act.
All right, and I typed those into the chat box for all the audience to see if you want to jot those down. Should a good CMS include procedure, policy, and work instructions? This would be per topic area. And maybe what this question is really getting at is, what should the components be? And that might be, now that I'm saying this out loud, that might be too broad of a question for us to get into entirely.
Well, not really. I'm just trying to make sure if others want to jump in, they jump in first.
You're just being kind. Don't be kind, Rozanne. Just jump on in.
All right. Well, I think that you are right. The compliance, one piece of your compliance management system would be the policies and the procedures and the work instructions. And most people think, oh, look at that. We have all these work instructions. We're done. No, the work instructions, that's really all they are, is they tell somebody how to do something. But it's this policy business and the procedures relating to those policies that are really such a challenge. And so you should have, just to give you a clue, there are approximately 55 policies that need to be written for the typical collection agency, debt buyer, collection law firm. That's kind of the number. And the reason I say it's approximate, I mean, it really depends on how you write them. Some can be more inclusive than others, and they should tie to your training program. So like a lot of things, if they're done in a vacuum and no one knows about them, they don't really count. So the whole point is to actually communicate your policies and procedures to your team, and the way they talk about it now, it's on a role, it's role based, like ROLE based. So collectors need to know some things about your policies and procedures but they may not need to know about how you post payments or how your accounting staff monitors the opening of checks every day, you know. So anyway.
Okay. What is the price range for a compliance manager? What should people expect to spend? I jokingly told the person who asked that it was $1 billion. I don't think he bought it, and you might have a better answer.
Well, let me start because there's no real good answer for that, because compensation is based on so many factors. Obviously, internal equity or fairness, external equity or fairness, what part of the country you're in. It's really hard. It's a supply and demand question. And it also depends on what skill set you're expecting. So, for example, if you're trying to hire a compliance manager, want to hire one who is an attorney, then that's a different pay level than maybe hiring a compliance manager that has some experience in the industry who's not a lawyer. So I don't know if we can really answer that question on this call. We've seen them anywhere, gosh, I even hate to speculate. All over the board, depending on the market company's operating in and the skill set of the person they're trying to hire.
And I agree with Chip. I know some of the factors that have gone into pricing, at least here on this side of the United States. First of all, the biggest difference is, are you hiring an attorney or are you not hiring an attorney? And then within that realm, if you are hiring an attorney that's like right out of law school that has law background in like credit protection type things or creditor rights, that's an avenue that you can go down that's less expensive than like you know, a seasoned attorney. The flip side of that is if you're not going to involve an attorney piece to it at all and you're going to somehow get the person trained. And the biggest thing I would recommend everybody on that when you're putting that money out is in those figures out, it does factor in training. So you might pay a little more to get that attorney right out of law school possibly, but the amount of training that you would have to put into somebody that has no industry knowledge that just is a compliance type person, you have to weigh those things out. And I guess I would still strongly recommend everybody, if you're just starting this up, to really truly consider adding and sort of putting together the third piece, which is the outside consultant piece, because it'll help you settle in before you go making a big commitment like that. It'll help you settle in on what you really need based on your demands of your clientele, your office size.
Rozanne, this question I think goes to you, or you and Chip specifically. Is there a place to go that has a starting list for the policies that a collection agency needs? Where would you send someone?
I would send them to Rozanne.
I would too. So don't be shy again, Rozanne.
Let me give you the Rozanne answer to that. We work really, yes, this is an Ontario Systems insideARM sponsored webinar, but we're really trying hard. You haven't heard, we're really trying hard to present information to you. But since I have just spent this entire winter writing policies and procedures for collection agencies, this is the Rozanne part. It's kind of hard for me to not mention that we actually do have model forms, and they are going to go live through insideARM in the very near future. But the actual list itself, I would not mind sharing that list or that index with you. And I think, yes, right now we have on the screen my contact information and Chip's, So if you just want to shoot me an email, I don't mind sharing that list. But the actual policies are not for sharing in that manner.
Sure. I have one more question that I'm going to throw out, and this could be for anybody in the group who wants to answer before I bid everybody adieu. Do you have any tips for the compliance managers who might be listening in? Any tips for compliance managers to get sort of an equal balance and not get frustrated with operations and bad decisions? What are, I think having that peer group is certainly helpful, so you can vent to others in your position. I can't get my operations guys to get a handle on this compliance stuff. But what else do you have any other ideas on just ways to sell that compliance message upward?
Well, one thing that I just want to jump in on that one. One thing I know more from working with so many different compliance people within the industry, if a compliance person asks that question, I know why. If you are a CEO or owner of your company or president or something, then I compliment you for being so sensitive and astute. The compliance officer, almost by definition, is the Debbie Downer of the organization. They tend to be conservative, and they say no, and they operations usually hates anything. Actually, operations probably likes to keep information from them, so they don't know about what's going on. Not because of illegal activity, just because that they're two completely different mindsets. So what I would say to the compliance officer that's having trouble being heard is that I would be very mindful of the need to present both the business case for something, like don't come with just the answer no, come with the solution, or we could do it this way, because you are working within a business environment that is there to thrive and grow and support many, many people, and the U.S. economy, by the way. So I really think my best advice is trying to put that business hat on as you deliver sound advice.
All right, I am going to, that was a terrific and smart answer, and I'm going to draw us to a close right now because we are out of time as a group. So once again, I want to thank all of you for spending an afternoon with us. We very much appreciate your participation. And I also want to thank today's panelists for being so generous with their time. Rozanne Andersen and Chip Hellman of Ontario Systems, Beth Zamorski of Todd Bremer and Lawson Inc., and Leslie Engel of Team Recovery. You guys were a fantastic panel to work with, so I really appreciated that. If you have questions about the content in today's presentation, you have a plethora of, there's your word for the day, of options. You can email Rozanne and Chip directly using the email addresses that you see on the screen. You can also send an email to editor@insideARM.com, and we will get the email to the right person in the right amount of time and try to get you an answer as soon as we can. If you have a question that wasn't answered today in the webinar or the Q&A, when you take that survey that I mentioned at the top, there is space there that you can ask that question there as well, which is another way to get it to us. We're coming up on fall, and that about does it for us here. Thank you all very much again for attending. We hope to see you next time, and you can all safely disconnect from the webinar. Goodbye.